Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today on Central Booking, I'm joined by Connecticut's own Mark L. Dressler, who writes Hartford set mysteries featuring Dan Shields, the detective who breaks all the rules. The series' third entry, Dead Wrong, was published earlier this year. In it, Dan is tasked with solving two baffling crimes: the death of a student DJ and a female security guard at Hartford City College, and the Halloween night killings of two individuals dressed as Batman. Throw in drugs, politics, and power, and he's got a case that's as sensational as it is sensitive. Before turning to crime fiction in his retirement, Mark had successful careers in corporate management and as a business owner. In addition to penning the Dan Shields mysteries, which also include Dead and Gone and Dead Right, he writes the Lex Stahl Manhattan mysteries. The first, Dying for Fame, is available now, with another to come. Mark donates a portion of the proceeds from his book sales to the Boston Children's Hospital. A member of Mystery Writers of America and the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association, Mark has been featured in the Hartford Current as a notable author and appeared on Hartford and New Haven TV stations, solidifying his status as one of the state's most beloved storytellers. Dead Wrong has a 5-star rating on Amazon. Customer reviewer JKA praised, Dan leaps off the page as a strong and complex character as he wrestles with past and present, always with an eye for justice and for safeguarding the future of his family. Like his fearless detective, Dressler does not shy away from gray areas, lending a gritty and empathetic realism to his characters and the city they inhabit. Now, join us as Mark L. Dressler reflects on his life in crime, fiction that is, and tells us what he got dead right in Dead Wrong. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Central Booking. I am delighted to be in the virtual company of Connecticut's own Mark Dressler tonight. He is the beloved author of the Dan Shields mystery series, the latest of which is Dead Wrong. It's out right now. You can go pick yourself up a copy. Welcome to the show, Mark. It's nice to have you here.
John, thank you for having me. It's really an honor, and I'm glad to be able to see you again. It's been a while since we've been in the same room, but sure I'm happy to see you again.
You as well. You know, by the virtue of technology, here we are sharing some kind of space in real time. It's a beautiful thing. All right. We're not going to spoil anything, but I do have to ask you specifically about Dead Wrong. Great cover, by the way. But this is the newest Dan Shields mystery, and he's really up against quite a challenge in this book because he's sort of embroiled in two mysteries, and we as the readers aren't really sure if they're related or not. So can you tell us, what he's up to in this book? What are those two cases that he's investigating?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, they're not related. So that's as much as I'll give away. But, the reason I went into two different cases is because I do have law enforcement people and a small staff of other people that I talk to. And the reality is that detectives work on more than one case at a time. And they don't start at one case and work to the end. And there are others that come in, and often they're not related. So I took on this challenge with, the first case starts out with a college student who was killed at a university, and his father happens to be wealthy and is a budding politician. The second murder later on is a gunshot, and it's actually an innocent victim, but Dan realizes that that case takes a little more priority than the first one because there's an active shooter on the loose. So part of the problem is that the wealthy father is a little bit annoyed that Dan isn't continuing, to find the murder of his son when this other case is taking precedent. And it's a challenge, and it's one that I felt I really had to do.
Sure, and it's an interesting point that you bring up because prioritizing cases when, power and privilege is involved is kind of a very murky area, and you get to see that when he's really torn in different directions. In the second case that he's involved in with the active shooter, there's an interesting bent to that I think readers might find intriguing. There's actually a series of Batman killings, people dressed as Batman. Would you mind speaking to that briefly? Because that was a fascinating concept.
I don't know where it came from. Well, the event happens on Halloween. I think that's where it starts. And Halloween is costume night. So that's where that crime comes in. And of course, um, again, without giving away too much of the book, there's actually a couple of people dressed in Batman suits, and I mentioned an innocent victim. So actually, the wrong guy gets shot first. And that leads Dan to the active shooter case and trying to hunt down the killer.
Sure. And so speaking of Mr. Dan Shields, he is known as the detective who breaks all the rules. And I do want to ask you about that. I want to ask you, one, how do you balance procedural elements with your own creative license, creative liberties? Because as a novelist, you are allowed some latitude, but also, have you found it more difficult to write about Dan Shields these days just because of the amount of scrutiny that law enforcement at large is under? Because if you're breaking the rules, somebody somewhere is probably seeing you do it. And I'm wondering if that has any influence on your work, or if you just, enjoy the fact that these are novels, they're fiction, and you can really do what you want with your stories.
It's all a combination of what you've said. I do take liberties. And like I said, I do have a staff. I call it a staff. They're unpaid, of course, but I talk with law enforcement people, medical people, lawyers, forensics people. And yes, I do bend the law. And fortunately for Dan, he's got a boss, a captain, who scolds him. He hates him, but he loves him because he knows Dan gets the job done. And the captain also knows that his job is on the line too, because his boss, the higher up, he's got to answer to him. So he kind of shields Dan a little bit. It's a love-hate relationship. He knows Dan gets the job done. And I guess I take a little more creative license than maybe a lot of people would in bending the rules and doing some things that, maybe a real police officer wouldn't do.
Sure. Hey, it makes it more fun. These are novels after all. And I think that most people would probably agree that, a lot of times justice is not delivered in black and white. There are a lot of gray areas. And I guess I should say, when Dan Shields is breaking the rules, it's not for nefarious purposes. He really is trying to achieve some kind of justice. So it's not like, he's a vigilante who's just doing anything. It's very well motivated. He does have a moral compass. So he is that kind of complex character.
Yeah.
And something else I'll ask you about, and what I really enjoyed about this book is not only do we get a glimpse into Dan's professional life, but we go home with him and we spend a lot of time, with his family, with his friends. And I really like that because so many of us are different in one setting versus another. And when you're a cop, that's a very intense job. And so you have to be hard charging and kind of serious, but that doesn't mean that there are other facets to your character. So I'm wondering, again, if you can talk about the balance of the two and how showing Dan at home gives us that glimpse into other facets of his character.
Yeah, first I'll tell you that Dan Shields is actually molded from two other characters. Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch. He's a character, and I love him. And so Dan is molded a little bit after Harry Bosch, as well as Popeye Doyle from the French Connection. So when he's on the job, that's where his rough outer exterior comes from. But when he goes home, he's just like, me. I was a corporate guy for years. I go home, and maybe you too. And he's an ordinary human being. He's got a great wife who is a child psychologist. And Dan's about 40 years old, by the way. And he's got 3 children, a boy and girl who are in elementary or maybe junior high school, and an older son who is a baseball prodigy. He's a sophomore at Arizona State University. And his home life is not a lot different than ours. He's got a nanny that takes care of the kids. Earlier on in another book, his mother had done that, but she unfortunately died, and the nanny came in. So his home life is his home life, and his professional life is his professional life.
Sure. And I have to say, the nanny cooks some wonderful food. So, you will be salivating. You will be wanting to eat that food. And there's a bit of romantic intrigue in this book as well, with one of Dan's sons. So let me ask you too, This is obviously an ongoing series. Each book stands alone, but for people who are revisiting these characters, can you just give us a brief insight into sort of what the ongoing story arc is for your returning readers? Like, what is the progression that they're going to see in this book?
Boy, that's a good question. And I don't even think I have an answer for that. The progression for me is Dan Shields, operating as Dan Shields, solving mysteries. I try to keep the family moving, and maybe it's a mistake in aging them a little bit as I go book to book to book, because I know a lot of authors don't age characters and they stay away from that. So maybe I'm setting myself up for something I don't expect. But, and the other thing is, I write as a pantser. I'll get into that a little later versus a plotter. Things just sort of happen. It's magic. And I got a kick out of your interview with Tess Gerritsen when she said she doesn't even know who did it until halfway through the book. And
no wonder we're stumped.
Oh yeah, and I said, "Oh my God, yes, absolutely." So I created this character, and actually he's become a part of me.
I would imagine, he really is a great character, and there's a lot of depth there. And I have to say, I know that some people do run into that issue of, aging characters, and then you reach a point, my gosh, what am I going to do with this person? But I like to see that progression because it feels more real to me, because people do grow up and relationships evolve. So a book like this really speaks to me, sometimes in a way where, the series of characters over 20 years, maybe they age like a year and a half. That maybe doesn't speak to me as much as something like this, depending on who the character is. But I digress. I do that a lot. So let me ask you about Hartford. You are a Hartford man, born and raised. And of course, that's Dan's beat. So can you talk a little bit about how place and plot work together in your books? And then for, people you're drawing in from Connecticut, what kind of locales are they going to see here? And are they going to appreciate if they know the area, know the streets, know certain businesses? Because I think, being a Connecticut reader, it is a fun thing to read a book set in a community that you might be familiar with.
Yeah, Hartford's special to me. I grew up here, and we'll get into a little bit later. I never really intended to start writing, but when I got into it and created Dan, I said, well, why not do Hartford? I know Hartford. And actually, when I started writing the book, one of the places in the earlier books that I mentioned is the Morgan Street Jail, which is down by Fox's and Morgan Street. It's been gone for years and years and years, so it's not around when Dan's a detective. But fictionally, I couldn't start a story without that jail or precinct. And of course, it's replaced with the modern jail. There are a lot of places in the book that I give different names to. For example, St. Francis Hospital is known as Woodland Hospital, and Franklin Avenue is known as Frankland Avenue. There's a bar in this place that has peanut shells on the floor, and people who did Franklin Avenue or Maple Street, whatever back then, would know which place I'm talking about. The interesting thing for me is that I'm not sure if I made a mistake by disguising the names of streets and businesses. I do know that if you mention a street or a number, you better make sure that the number of that street doesn't exist. So the reason that happened is because I guess as I was writing and before publishing, I had spoken with an author who had written a book, and it was a book take place in West Hartford, and he changed the names of streets and sites. And I asked him why. And it was just a precaution of the possibility of getting sued. But the reality is, who's going to sue me? And I'm not sure if I made a mistake. Some readers, by the way, do call me on the carpet for that. And other readers don't, because they know what I'm talking about.
Sure. I think it's kind of fun. It's almost a mystery within a mystery because you come across a place or an area and it sounds very familiar. And then you say, oh, maybe this was the inspiration for that. But it's an interesting point that you make because, if you mess up a detail, somebody's going to tell you about it. And there's an author that we both know. And I remember her telling me once that she used to love to put real life restaurants in her books. And then she kept doing that. And every time she would publish a book, the restaurants would close. And she felt like some sense of responsibility. And so she stopped doing it just because every single time without fail, the restaurant would sort of become irrelevant. So, maybe erring on the side of caution or discretion is not necessarily a bad thing. And another topic I would love for you to speak to, if you don't mind, is the fact that you donate a portion of your proceeds to the Boston Children's Hospital, which I think is a really wonderful thing to do. So I'm wondering if you can tell me what inspired you to make that decision and why is that a cause that's very near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, that's a very personal thing. I have 6 grandchildren, God bless. And my younger daughter, actually my youngest grandson, he's 10 now, and he's absolutely healthy, and he's always been healthy, but he was born with a congenital birth defect, okay? And when he was 8 months old, my daughter, her husband, my wife and I went to Boston Children's Hospital. He was operated on by the surgeon who actually invented the type of surgery he needed. And we were there for 2 days. And while we were there, I'm saying we saw a lot of people, parents, grandparents, and children. Some people's lives will never be the same. Their kids are forever stricken with something horrible. The children there, you see and you kind of feel that there's no child that deserves to be in a place like this. So when we walked out with my healthy, surgically repaired grandson the next day, something honestly just came over me, and I stood there and I was thankful, and I said, I have to give back. And this is an opportunity. I have to give back to this place because they do great things. And I feel for all the families and children.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, and kudos to you for doing such a wonderful thing. And I'm really glad to know that, things worked out well for your grandson and he came out of that situation happy, healthy. You can't ask for more than that. But it's nice to know that there are still people in this world who recognize and give back to the people who help us through difficult times. So I'm glad we got to mention that. And so we have spoken a lot about Mr. Dan Shields tonight, but that's not the only thing that you write. You also write the Lex Stahl Manhattan mystery series. So for those people who might not be familiar with her, can you tell us a bit about her character? And also, what do you enjoy about different characters, different settings, different circumstances, being able to explore a world beyond Hartford? What does that do for you as a storyteller?
Well, first of all, let me say that after I'd written the first Dan book, I had started to write the Lex book. I'm not sure what inspired me. Well, actually, I do. Most of my stories start with something of my professional background. So I actually started to write that book. And what happened was when Dead and Gone came out, I started getting feedback. And the feedback was such that, hey, when is the next Dan Shields book coming out? So I said, oh my God, I'm typecast already. So
it didn't take long.
no, so I put Lex aside and wrote the next Dan Shields book. But Lex Stahl is I guess I can call her sexy. Again, 38-year-old, good-looking female detective from New York. And she's got a past that has got some skeletons in the closet. And she's very likable, lovable, but she's hard-nosed, good sense of humor. And the difficult thing is a male writing a female character is very, very hard. So I'm very thankful that I have my wife, a female editor as well, who kept telling me, no, She's not going to wear this. She's not going to really talk like this. She's not going to think this. Okay. So it all helped me put together what I think is a very memorable character in Lex Stahl. And I think because of the event I based it on, it had to take place in New York. And a lot of this does take place, without giving away a lot of the story, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And an interesting other thing is, I referred before to changing the names of streets and places. Well, I realized this is New York City. You cannot hide Fifth Avenue, Park Place, Grand Central Station, Central Park. Those are real names and places. And I also did, I did know that if you mention those places, of course, make sure the address doesn't exist, but also don't say anything negative about those places, okay? And so Lex was a real challenge. And again, without giving anything away at the end, the next Lex book is on its way.
Excellent. Terrific. So I say you are still a young man, but I need to ask you, you already sort of mentioned that you had no idea, in your retirement years that you would be writing novels. So what actually, led you to this? And what satisfaction do you get, out of writing mysteries that you don't get from other areas of your life, past or present?
It's a new thing. It's total. Interestingly, I retired in 2011. Okay. And for 3 years, I don't remember what I did. But in the meantime, my younger daughter had bought a house. Okay. And the house was set way back from the road. You didn't even know there was a house. It was on 7 acres of land. The deck and everything was out like forest-like setting. Okay. And I'd go on the deck sometimes and stand there and point, and I'd say, you can find a dead body out there. No one would ever find it. No one would ever know. Something happened in 2014 when I went home one night. I started writing about a dead body in that forest. And I had maybe, I'm going to say at most 5 pages. Okay. I wasn't a writer, didn't know what I was doing. Left it. Something made me go back to it. And I started writing, and I call it the magic of writing just sort of started taking place. And you'll know what I'm talking about. When you start creating characters, all of a sudden they start talking to each other. And then, oh my God, they start going places you didn't really know they were going. They start driving the bus. And I just kept going. And I don't know, 6-8 months or so, I had 300 pages of something, a first draft, and I didn't know what I had. And that kind of started me. And it got me into, I think, it got me into other groups that I found out about, like Mystery Writers of America, and just getting involved with them. And going to some meetings and talking with other authors and people, I started thinking, I'm an author.
Right.
And my God, when I'm telling those people about how I'm writing, they're going, yeah, that's what happens. So from that point on, I did find other groups, Sisters in Crime, Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association, that I belonged to. And I had spoken with a member of Mystery Writers of America about publishing. And part of me wanted to do traditional publishing. And yes, I did try that route with writing queries and synopsis and sending it to agents. And as you know, it's a very difficult road. And one thing I said, I didn't know anything in the beginning. And I certainly was a rookie, let's say, at writing a professional proposal. And my writing was, let's say, less than professional at the time, and I didn't know it. So I decided to go the self-published route. But learning with other authors in these societies, I learned, okay, you don't write a book alone. And you get into the value of editors and cover designers, formatters, and self-editing and everything. So to do a professional product, it is a process. So the book that I was talking about, Dead and Gone, that I started writing in 2014, was published in 2017. So that became the first one. And then maybe the author bug did stay with me, and I got inspired to do more writing. And it is part of me now, part of a person that I didn't know was there.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And it's, you know, a socially acceptable way to engage with the voices in your head. People look at you strange and you say, I'm a writer. And then they say, okay, I get it. I get it. But let me ask you, you know, to expand a bit more on self-publishing, because it's a much more, I think, viable, legitimate vehicle for publishing now than it was seen maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But your book, this is, you know, a really good looking product. It's got a terrific cover. It's edited well. The formatting is terrific. But these are all kinds of considerations that as a self-published author, you know, you need to have knowledge of that and make sure that you're putting out a book that is presented very, very well. So would you mind speaking to, you know, what the best practices are for a self-published author to sort of get away from that stigma of the non-professional looking book? Because everybody knows, you know, we do judge a book by its cover as much as its contents.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm not afraid to admit I have learned the hard way, okay? And I've been through 3 or 4 different editors, okay? And I can't stress, a lot of self-published authors are authors who want to self-publish. I don't know if they realize what's involved, but there are a lot of people who want to take shortcuts. And, you know, it does take some money to do it right, okay? And a lot of people are afraid to hear that word money. And like when it comes to editing, maybe they'll hire a school teacher, a friend, somebody, and they haven't realized that, no, editing is a profession. Not only is it a profession, an editor is not an editor. And like in my case, I needed a developmental editor as well as all the other editors. So I'm very happy that I found my permanent editor, and she has gotten praise. And like I said, it takes a team to write a book. So and the editing process, you know, that doesn't happen until after you've self-edited. Okay, the first draft is a first draft. And I've just self-edited my next book for the 5th time. And it is going to my editor in October. And she's ready for it. And once it goes to her, it'll be 2 months before we're done editing. Okay, there's 2 passes, okay? And once that's done, then the next most important part, and you hit on it, is the cover. And that's something, again, I can't stress enough to other authors or prospective authors. Yes, there are vehicles where you can self-design a cover, okay? And a lot of people do. Some are good, okay? And some, let's say, are not as good as they could be. I'm very fortunate that I found a cover designer who happens to live in Cape Town, South Africa. And she is fabulous. I've recommended other authors to her. She's worked for them. One of the things I love about her is she wants to know about the book. She's got questionnaires. And cover editors, yes, they're professionals. There are rules that they follow. They know what they're doing. And it's not the first time out of the box that you're going to get it right, okay? But you end up with a professional cover. And you're right, people judge a book by the cover. And to me, the cover has to stand out in such a way that you don't even really need to read the cover to know what the book is about. If you've got a good cover, it should draw you in. And I'm very happy that I have who I have. And am I lucky? Maybe I'm lucky. And yes, you do have to spend some money to get it done. I also have an excellent book formatter. So it all comes together, and eventually it gets up to Amazon and then over to Ingram. And there's reasons for that.
Sure.
Yeah. But again, I can't stress enough the value of editing and cover design.
Absolutely. And the thing I love about this book, this cover, I mean, it's very catchy, but and unfortunately, I don't have them all to hold up, but I will put pictures in the introduction. You have very stylized, distinct covers. A Mark Dressler book looks like a Mark Dressler book, and you know it from looking at it. They're terrific. And, everything you were speaking to just goes to show that it really is sort of a labor intensive process, and you get out of that process what you put into it. And a lot of people do want to take shortcuts, and they want to get a book into the world, but you really want it to be the best book that you can get into the world. And then maybe you'll be fortunate enough to bring forth more books to put in the world. So thank you for, illuminating that, because I think that some people really don't understand the levels of work that go into making a book such as this. Just because it's self-publishing doesn't mean it's a one-stop shop. There's many, many facets to it. And you just gave us a really great glimpse into that, which I appreciate. And I do want to bring you back to the idea of a writer's community as well. And you already spoke to this, a bit, telling us about some of your affiliations, but would you mind expanding on that just a little to tell us, what benefits do you get from this writer's community, not only in terms of, writing or craft itself, but maybe in terms of, the emotional aspects of being a writer, because it is a very distinct thing, and people who don't write probably don't understand the levels of hell that you might put yourself through to bring a story from start to finish.
Yeah, by the way, okay, other people have made this, I don't want to call it a mistake, but I really would appreciate it if I'm referred to as Mark L. Dressler. The L is important. There are other Mark Dresslers out there, and I've been mistaken, but the L is important.
My apologies. No, Mark, you were the only Mark Dressler to me, but it will be Mark L. Dressler.
Thank you. Yeah, I belong to a few groups, and each group's got different members, and some people join 2 or 3 groups. But it is good knowing that there are other people who are, quote unquote, in your boat, even though the different genres of people. There's lots of different books. It's nice to know that there are other people who enjoy what you do. You can also learn from other people. You have to be willing to learn. And like I say with books, I started with nothing. Do I think I know everything? Absolutely not. I mean, I will never stop learning. And I've talked to other authors, John Grisham and Michael Connelly and the likes, and I'm not in their category, and I know it, but I'm happy with who I am, and I followed the route I have. And the other authors that I meet, they're most of them are self-published like me, they can also tell you their experiences with not only publishing, but a little bit of marketing and events and things that they do, and give you ideas too. So I think there's a lot of value in joining groups where you fit in.
Sure. And I've said it probably a million times before, and I'll say it a million times again. And anybody who tunes in repeatedly is thinking right now, shut up, John. We know what you're going to say before you say it. But the mystery community is so generous. I think sometimes people have this notion of writers being in competition with one another and one-upsmanship and backstabbing. And it's just not like that at all. People are very welcoming, and they're sort of your biggest cheerleaders, because when one person wins, it's kind of a win for everybody. And so it's a great group of people to be associated with.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Well, we are fortunate to have you among our ranks. And let me ask you too, you sort of touched upon some of the books that you enjoy reading. And a lot of great writers are first great readers. So would you mind, again, just sharing some of those influences, some of those authors that you really enjoy? So maybe if people pick up your books, they will want to pick up those books as well if they haven't already.
Well, I mentioned Michael Connelly, John Grisham, Tess Gerritsen. I read the Kellermans, David Baldacci, and James Patterson. And by the way, a lot of people compare the Lex Stahl book, which is called Dying for Fame, takes place in New York. A lot of people compare that favorably to James Patterson. It's kind of written in his style work. So I think reading like kinds of people does help. Sometimes it humbles me because a lot of those people are brand names. Okay, I'm not. But again, I'm comfortable with where I am. And, it's good to know those people do what they do.
Sure. And to draw comparisons to James Patterson, not a bad thing at all, because that man knows how to get people reading. So obviously you do as well. So question that I ask everybody now who comes on this show, because there's always people tuning in, who maybe have ambitions of their own in terms of a creative or writing life. So in looking back, what do you think is the best advice that you were ever given in terms of a writing or creative life? And then the best advice that you were never given and had to learn for yourself throughout the process of actually doing it?
Yeah, I think we hit upon the best advice, which is, kind of reading people who kind of write like you write, or how you like to write. The piece of advice I never got that, it's a tough question, but I think I referred to it and said before, is that I didn't know anything. I learned the hard way, and I had to learn the hard way. And, there's value to that. I'm just happy to be fortunate enough to learn those things. I'd like to also say that part of my writing, what's happened to me, we get into a little bit of marketing sort of stuff. And, I'm not great with the computer. I do things on Facebook, and I don't have Ingram or Twitter accounts or even a web page, but I do things there, and writing wise and book wise, I've been very fortunate. I've managed to sell a lot of books. I do craft fairs, I do corporate events, some public speaking, and there's a key there in going places where there are crowds. Fortunately, my books are still bestsellers at Barnes & Noble in downtown Hartford, the Yukon store. And I've been very fortunate to have been on a couple of popular TV shows, CT Style in New Haven with Teresa Dufour, and Real People with Stan Simpson on Channel 61 in Hartford. So those have gotten me a little bit of notoriety. And the Hartford books, I'm also lucky in that I hit a niche, not really knowing it, but Hartford has meant a lot of people to, not only people, I will say there's a lot of classmates and a lot of Floridians who are former Hartford people who gravitate towards it. So it's all come together very nicely for me, and I'm very happy with where things are. So as far as the next adventure, it is Lex Stahl. Okay, Lex Stahl is involved in her second adventure, where she takes on the kidnapping of an author whose name happens to be Essex Westbrook. To Connecticut.
To Connecticut, I love it.
Yeah, and his wife Svetlana, who is kidnapped. And the novel is titled Write, WRITE, To the End, and it'll be coming in early 2023.
That is most excellent. I am a sucker for mysteries with a bookish bent or a punny kind of clever title, so you've drawn me in. Mr. Dressler. And in the meantime, it's nice to know, that people can catch up. There's several Dan Shields mysteries to read now. There's the first stall book, but this is the one right now, Dead Wrong, and the man is Mark L. Dressler. So pick up the books, and thank you so much for being here tonight, Mark, and for sharing so generously with us.
Thank you, John. It was my pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.